Today we're going to talk about my favorite charger. This is the HOTA D6 Plus Duo Smart Charger. It is a 300 watt AC and 650 watt DC dual port 6S Max charger that I am in love with. I needed a charger that I can keep either on the desk or bring with me to travel. Up until this point, I've mostly been using the D6 Duo Pro, but I wanted to shake things up a little bit and get something else on the table with some more features and a little bit more power. This version only did 200 watts on AC. This does 300 watts, and that's the difference of charging at... Do math in head. Hold on. That's the difference between charging at 11.4 amps total for 6-cell charging or 8 amps total for 6-cell charging. So when I'm in the field or out of town or whatever, being able to charge those extra 3-ish amps is actually really valuable. On the side here, you've got your balance plugs. You plug your batteries straight in or through a balance lead, however you want to do it. I've got two discharge 6-cell LiPos here that I'm plugging in, one in each channel, and then I'm just going to go ahead and blast charge each channel to show you how many amps it can do across the whole thing. So you can see that the amplitude amps charge on one side but not on the other, so you've got to kind of split it. Unfortunately, you got to decide ahead of time how many amps you wanted to do. So we're doing 9, so we'll split it in half at like 5 or 4.5. So I should be able to take this to 5.5 amps. And it's going to split those available amps across both channels relatively even. So it looks like I could probably go to 6 or so, and it would still be able to charge 6 amps per channel on both these batteries. Now, most people aren't probably charging at 6 amps, but what that does allow me to do is grab a balance lead, such as this, and split all of that amplitude across 2 different batteries or a bunch of different batteries all the way across, and that means that I can do 12 amps on AC input, meaning I don't have to have an extra power supply like this. I can just bring this thing with the AC input that's just plugged straight into the wall and be able to charge at such high amplitudes. That's really, really powerful to me. I keep using the word amplitude. That's the wrong word. This is not about sound. It's about amps. But whatever. Ignoring all that, let's go ahead and cancel these. What's even more awesome is that when I plug this in through DC, so if you look at the back here, you've got a few different connections. You've got your AC input, 100 or 240 volts, so if you're traveling overseas, you can still use it. DC input, 6.5 volts, which is actually really important. I'll tell you why in a sec. Up to 30 volts. And then you also have a 5-volt 1.2 amp USB out and then a USB input for changing settings and updating firmware and stuff like that. And they update their firmware fairly often, which is pretty cool. DC input, having it go down to 6.5 volts is really nice because then you can use it on your car battery. So I have alligator clips that I will plug into the DC input and then plug the alligators into a car battery. But car batteries only operate at 12 volts, and I have certain chargers, ISDT, that require 12 volt minimum, which means that I am stuck being able to use car batteries below a certain voltage, which is really unfortunate. Finally, on this side, you've got 2 big old fans that are, one is pulling in and one is blowing out. Well, I guess pulling across through the giant intake in the front. And then on the front, you have your screen with touch-sensitive buttons. Now, I'm not a super big fan of the touch-sensitive. I actually kind of like this little wheel thing that was on the other versions. Be it is what it is. Inside of each thing, you can do all of the normal charging functions. You can do charge, discharge, storage charge, balance charge, all the way down. And then you also have these 2 extra options called external discharge and power supply, which I'll get back to. Next in, you have your chemistry types. You got smart battery, LiHV, LiPo, lithium ion, lithium ferrite, and then my favorite, nickel, zinc, lead, acid, nickel, metal hydride, and nickel. I don't even know what that one is. And Eneloop. I don't even know what Eneloop is. But tons of different options for different types of battery chemistries. I typically use LiPo or LiFe. cell counts up to 6 cell for LiPo. You could go probably to 8 for lithium ferrite. And then you have your current settings go all the way up to 15 amps. You can only do 15 amps when you're using DC input for a low voltage battery like a 2 cell. But what I've experienced is that you can do about 12 amps full out, maybe a little bit more on a 6 cell battery. Obviously the watt limitation per channel starts to play there. And then start her up. You access each different channel just by tapping the channel button, and you can see different information about what's going on in the battery. So if I start this battery and look into it, I can look at each individual cell voltage as well as the resistance on each cell after it goes for a little while. You have your watt output, your voltage, the current voltage of the battery. You have the input voltage, which is over here. Which is right here, the 15.2. And then you have the current charge amperage and milliamp hour that has been put into the battery. There's a percentage, time having been done, and all that good stuff. So I've now gone ahead and hooked the charger up to this box, which has inside of it a 63 amp capable power supply at 24 volts, and you can see that I'm pushing 12.3 out the top, 12.7 in the bottom, and that's a much higher watt hour output than just on the AC input. So just something to be aware of is that this is capable of running some pretty high currents. That's almost 30 amps total, a little bit less than that, at 6S voltage. So that's actually pretty impressive. It just needs a little bit extra juice on the back end to be able to push out that much. For example, I have one of these pretty decent ready-made RC 24 volt 400 watt power supplies, and this caps out at only 16.7 amps, and this can ask for more than this can give. So it's actually pretty crazy that this little charger can give out that much power split across those two different channels. I just wish I could do more on AC only input. Without a battery charging, you go to any screen and hold down the menu button. You can go into the system settings, task parameters. You can do things like safety timers, end current, trickle charge. You can do task parameter, system parameters, so set the language. You can set the maximum power that it will pull in. So say you only had a 400 watt power supply, you could set this to like 390 watts, and it would never take so much current out of the power supply that would shut down the power supply. Minimum voltage, so like if I'm working with a car battery, I'll set this minimum input voltage up to like 11 volts so that I never overdraw the car battery below the safely required voltage. LCD volume, completion signal, always switch it to single. Repeat is super obnoxious because it just beeps and beeps and beeps until you go pull your battery off the charger, which is safe, I'll admit, but drives me crazy. Back, calibrate, checking, factory settings, all that good stuff. So that's the basic overviews, but I want to talk about two specific features. That is the power supply feature and the external discharge feature. Both of those are really, really fascinating, and two of the things that I think make or break this charger. They add a lot of power that is going to make me want to have this on my bench at all times. The next major feature that this thing can be really useful for is it can be a standalone power supply. Now, for those of you that may not be familiar with what a power supply does, is it basically provides a constant amount of voltage at a certain watt rating. So I could go in here, click power supply mode instead of charge, discharge, external discharge, etc. I can then choose the voltage that I want it to be putting out between 5 and 24 volts. And then I can choose the amount of power that I want it to put out at max. So I can make that really low or really high. Now, once I hit the start button, this cable coming out of the balance lead, or out of the power lead here on the side, is going to now be hot with 5 volts at a maximum of 20 watts. So, for example, if we're sitting here working on a quad, rather than going and getting a battery, a 4-cell for my Cinewhoop, I'll just set this to, somewhere in the 4S voltage range. That's 15 volts at 20 amps, or 20 watts. Grab my squirt, and now I can plug it in. And it powers up, and you can even see how much current, how much wattage it's actually asking for at any given moment. So we might actually go over our 20 watt limit here, but I'll power on my controller. and it shut it down once it got to too high of a wattage. I'm going to go ahead and turn up the wattage. Well, let's just leave it at 20 for now. Wait for this to connect. 17 watt hours. We're over 20. And it maxed out at that 20 watt hour. So it's not letting us push more than that amount of power. So like, let's put this up to maximum 325. And we should be able to really crank this. And it will keep up with that request. So it's pretty cool that you can use it to test quads on the bench. And then, you know, say I was done working on that squirt, and so I needed to switch over to a 6S quad. Switch this over to now 24 volts, powered up, just the same. So the ability to be able to just change that voltage for whatever you need is really powerful. It allows you to move from thing to thing without having to go search for a battery. I just made a couple different cables for different types of connectors. So now I've got an XT30. We will stop that one, go to the XT30 channel, power supply, 12 volts, 50 watts, and power up my tiny trainer. Pretty sweet, right? Now this feature can get even more powerful. What I've done here is I've made this little board with a couple cables on it, and so I've got this LED. I don't know what color it's going to be. Ignore that it's green on this side. I actually do know what color it's going to be. I just am doing this for the point. You know, while I'm working on my bench, not exactly sure what this is. Just really quickly wire it up, plug it in, go over power supply at 12 volts, and start. We know it's green now. So now all I've done is turned off the power supply, so I'm going to unwire it from this, and I need to test this Unify Nano to see if it's working or not. So I'll just solder in the positive and negative leads, and these are 5 volt only, so just tap in here, tap in there, bounce it down to 5 volt. 325 watts is way more than enough, so we'll just push this down and start. If you watch real close, blink, you can see that it's starting to blink right down in there, which means it's on. And we can test video, make sure that everything is working on that. Oh, looks like it's transmitting on R7. It's going to be black, obviously, but it's on. So we stopped it. Now it's just putting out nothing. Desolder what we're working on. Now I need to test this flight controller. This one doesn't have a VBAT in, so I need a specific voltage. That voltage is 5 volts, obviously. That's wired on there. And 5 volts, start. Bada boom. So it's just a really, really handy tool to have with you for whatever you're working on, whether it's an LED, VTX, flight controller, maybe an ESC. All those things can be powered by the power supply that's in this thing and allow you to really quickly move through things and test different things. I think that's a really, really cool feature for chargers to have. I think all chargers should probably be able to do that because, I mean, they're already voltage regulators that push out different kinds of voltages for batteries, so might as well do it for these too. One of the things I liked about the previous generation of this smart charger is that this pad here actually functions as a cell phone charger. So it's a wireless cell phone charger, but this is made out of metal, so they obviously can't put a charger in it, which is kind of disappointing if you ask me, because that was actually a really cool feature, one of the main reasons I like this thing. But obviously you can see the screen is broken again, and I need to fix that. I have a new one here, I just haven't actually done it yet, but I'm sad to see that feature go because I thought that was a really good idea. It is what it is. Another awesome feature of this charger is that it does something called external discharging. And what that means is, so say I'm at the end of a day of flying, I didn't use all my batteries, and I know I'm not going to fly for a few weeks, and this battery here has 25 volts still left in it. What I can do is use this charger to discharge this battery quickly. And in order to do that, all I have to do is plug this into the back of the charger as the input source, plug in my male to male, and then I need some sort of voltage dispersion, something to suck it up. Usually that would end up being something like a light or a series of resistors or a fan or something like that. In my case, I have something called the sun. This is two 1-watt COBs on a power distribution board thingy. And yeah, this is what I use to discharge my batteries. Actually, no, it really isn't. But this is an example of something that you could use. And if I go into the charger, I hit external discharge and say cell voltage of 3.8, current setting of as many amps as you want, and start task. I'm looking away because those things are so bright. Let's just turn that sideways so we don't get blinded. And it's going to start pulling amperage out of that battery. So right now it's at 29 volts at 23, 34 watts or so. And it's going to continue to pull current out of this battery until it reaches the voltage that we predetermined. So the voltage that we had set was 24 point, or well, it was 3.8 volts per cell times 6 cells is 22 something, and it's just going to keep going until that battery reaches that voltage, and then it's going to shut it off. So I'm not going to kill this battery. I'm not going to overdraw it. I'm just going to draw it down to the point that we preset beforehand. Now, I wouldn't recommend doing it with these things because these get pretty hot, but there's plenty of other options out there for things that you could use to draw current out of something. My only thing that I wish that you could do with this is set the output voltage. So like I could put it into like a 12 volt PC fan or something like that. Just kind of something that I think would be really nice. And I can't dump this into another battery for some reason. It doesn't let me do that, which I guess kind of makes sense because, you know, I wouldn't necessarily be trying to preserve that energy, but just a couple different thoughts on what I would love to be able to do with that. Well, I hope that you guys really enjoyed this quick overview of the HOTA D6 Plus charger and why I love this thing. I know this is probably not the most exciting video in the world, but I've been playing around with this over the last few days, and I'm really excited about it and what it's going to mean for me. Just having the ability to throw just this thing in my bag and be able to take it on the road and stay charged and keep flying is going to be really sweet. So I hope that this is a useful tip for you and that you too can stay flying.